Alright guys, this is Hank with real life conversation, and I think I'm going to try and put a few pieces together for you based on, of course, what else? Speculation. Reasoned speculation. That's good. Okay, here's what I suspect that the coronavirus is being used for in America. An operation within an operation. This is not uncommon, especially if you have something like economic collapse. Now, why would we have economic collapse? Is it due completely to the incompetency of bankers? No, it's not. There's a lot of reasons that you could have a collapse. Now, the incompetency of the bankers is, of course, when you have layers of operations within inside operations. If they were really trying to be protected, would they be as scapegoated as they are? Would they be as hated as they are? Would that promotion of that hatred be so universal? I mean, yeah, the bankers really greedy and really kind of screwed it up by not optimizing, by moving away from a physical economy. See, I think they did have a plan for the New World Order, but that plan would have only run had not God intervened. God has been here all along, but what I think surprised a lot of people is the intensity of the sun and how quickly our environment is changing, and that's going to lead to a lot of crop failures. Now, when you have a population on Earth that's over 7 billion people, we're not going to be able to feed them all. This is not, I think some people are under the mistaken impression that this is the emergence of the totalitarian New World Order. And what my conclusion is that this is the end of globalism and a return to local sustainabilities. Because as the future moves on, this is the only way that you're going to be able to survive. So there is going to always have to be a transition point. So let me explain what my conclusion, what I know the facts are, and then what I'm, with little reasoned speculation, what my conclusions are. Okay. Now, first thing I look at is cover, and I look at staging of the deployments. Okay. Where has the emphasis been placed with the coronavirus? The emphasis, if you listen to some of the governors and other political figures, when you read between the lines and you cut away the bullshit, and then you can make some reasoned speculation that there's a reason why they're telling you that lie. But then every lie is a bit of truth. So where is the emphasis? What would this lie accomplish? Okay? The emphasis is on medical facilities, medical supplies, doctors, medics, nurses, conservation on medical resources, and my speculation is that this is for long-term trauma endurance. Okay. Now, the next thing is like they want you to conserve and not go for your elective surgeries because they're going to need all those masks and gloves and surgical supplies and everything that's sterile to treat trauma. Okay. Now, I'm not some psycho. I laugh because I'm a man of joy, and I trust in God, and I'm as prepared as I can be, as anybody can be, I think. And if you don't laugh, you cry. So just have a little fun with life, okay? I'll bring you bad news with a smile on my face. case, all right? Now, free healthcare. Anybody that's still talking about free healthcare has got their head so far up their ass, it's incredible. The only way to get free healthcare is to know physicians. So directly within my circle of preparation, see, preparations are not made, in my opinion, best by thinking about just yourself and your family and your self-sufficiency, or how long can one thing that you have last. It's about building teams of reliable people that you can trust to get specific things done. Everybody has a component. See, I'm not a military-minded type of person, although I'm more of logistics and looking towards the future, communicator, basically an overglorified errand boy. That's probably the best way to describe me, pajama scholar. Okay. So no physician. So directly in my circle be a cardiologist, a dentist, okay, Marine Corps medic, veterinarians, and then chemists. So if we do have like outbreaks in specific areas where disease is spreading because of a lack of sanitation, because maybe, if power goes off and the air goes out, then there's going to be a lot of bodies to bury. When you got, or if water's not flushing, you're going to have problems with sanitation. You'll have stuff like, what do they call it? Dysentery, which might not actually be the disease. That might be an outcome of it. Maybe, I don't know. See, I'm not the doctor, okay? I do keep books around for consultations so I can bring myself up to speed, but I'm not the doctor, okay? Now, I took a look at the military staging areas. Okay, where are they staging the military? Okay, Jacksonville, Florida. This is for my area. But I'm just kind of showing you how I think it through so you can think it through for your own area. Orlando, Florida. Miami, Florida. Tampa, Florida. Now, what are the commonalities in all of these areas, okay? Sports arenas, okay? Think Katrina. Large populations. Definitely going to be supply stresses. Traffic hubs. Think about the demographics of desperation that typically coexist around a sports arena. Okay. Easy flow to this control point. They're always near to large airports, and typically speaking, not terribly far from the rail lines. All right, so what would this focus be with all those commonalities in place? Focus would probably be intended targets. And who would those intended targets of distribution and control be? You must understand your audience. Okay? They would be the desperate, unskilled, uncoordinated, what eventually would become criminal elements, but at present, probably just regular people with that might lose their jobs and not have been thinking ahead and might maybe just not believing that this would be possible. Okay. Oh, it could never happen to us. It could never happen here. Okay. History shows that this happens over and over and over again. 70-year cycles. Every generation has a challenge to overcome. It's just a fact. Okay. So, desperate, unskilled, uncoordinated, probably future to become criminal elements. They funnel this particular class of people, and I'm not talking racially, I'm just talking the class of people that are unprepared, okay, of people towards this triage style collection point, managed with overwhelming force. That's why they bring in the Humvees and the machine guns. So if anybody wants to get cute and start firing off a couple of rounds thinking they're gonna play like somebody in friggin' Zimbabwe or one of the other hellscapes in the world where they bring in the food trucks and some fucking warlord comes along and commandeers the whole thing. It's full of rice and water or whatever else they brought in, and then lords it over the people. So you would protect that with machine guns. So if somebody tried to get cute, they just fucking blast your ass to bits. Okay. So that's managed with overwhelming force. Anything the military does, they're going to do it with overwhelming force. They're not going to give your ass a chance to respond. That's just how they roll. All right. No riots. Diminishes widespread pandemonium with what I'm going to call hopium, disaster relief supply. Okay, so people, seeing their grocery stores empty or whatever, will be funneled towards these points of control, all right, to receive, supplies. And then that's going to keep, instead of pandemonium becoming widespread, you can centralize your pandemonium and manage the situation more effectively. Now, here's my conclusion. Self-reliant, self-regulating, armed, skilled, and peaceful patriots are not the intended target. If you are any system of government and you want to preserve your government, you actually want to preserve the continuity of government, the people that you do not want to target are your skilled populations that are self-regulating, peaceful, and armed, that can deal with their own problems, and they'll be happy to pay a little tax to not have to deal with major fucking problems. So that's where the citizens and the government come together on this particular issue. Other than that, it's like if you alienate your specialists and your self-reliant war fighters and farmers, you are fucking screwed. So those are the people that you would want to protect, not attack. What's the fastest way to lose production? Is basically to try and force somebody to do it. If you can find some reasonable means of exchange, then they'll continue and happily provide their services, some quite generously. But if you make the attempt to force them to do it, you are not going to get cooperation, and you probably get a lot worse than just no cooperation. All right. So I honestly don't believe that the Patriots are the intended target, because the Patriots are not the problem, especially not in this particular shift. All right. When I hear people talk about the politicians are in no threat, well, they're not. They really aren't. I mean, not really, because typically speaking, they're just going to fade off into wherever fucking hole they want to hole up in. And typically speaking, it would probably be some self-reliant, self-regulating, armed, skilled community with all the specialists. So that's where the resources would flow. Okay. Now, what I'm going to talk about real quick here is what I'm going to call the 60-round militias. All right, and this basically applies to, and I'm using the word militia here, not appropriately. I'm using it in sort of a tongue-in-cheek way, because these are not militias at all. They're intimidating, haphazard, untrained gangs who organize to commandeer supplies, not a American militia that is based on principle and that is constitutionally sound and willing to defend their communities in exchange for peace, a place to live, and the help of the specialists and farmers to live a good life. Okay, so a real militia is assuming the risk of defending principle and defending property with violence against violence, and in exchange for that risk, they get the cooperation of specialists. Now, the 60-round militias, I've named them because those are the kind of guys that went in with the credit card. It's almost maxed out right before the shit hit the fan. They don't have any food, and they can't afford They probably have one magazine, and they probably can't afford even 200 rounds to practice with. It's like you go in, you hear the gun shop guy. You know a guy's making a purchase of a rifle for the first time, and you're standing around the gun shop and you're listening to the guy, and the gun shop guy goes, "What you want 1,000 rounds?" And the guy's going, "Can you take the baby? Because all I can part with this credit card right here is let me get 200 rounds," and he feels like that's generous. Well, if you haven't drilled with your weapon and fired it at least 1,000 times, you're not going to have the proficiency to engage. What you'll have with a 60-round militia, one magazine, they'd have to come back, reload it. You're basically going to have people that will attempt to band together, because you can take a 60-round militia and go after undefended targets or lowly defended targets, low-hanging fruit, and intimidate and commandeer. So that's precisely what the military would try to avoid, so they can keep their specialists online and not, we in America believe in self-reliance, but we're not so ignorant that we don't understand what cooperation is, okay? So the real community militias, I already talked about this, and just to reinforce the point, have probably trained right alongside a law enforcement, because they're going to share the same ranges. They're going to go typically to the same gun shops. They're going to live in the same friggin' areas. They're going to know each other. So, it's like it's your irregular support element to deal with violence. So that's going to cover this real talk, where my reason speculation is for a coronavirus, an operation with inside an operation. Later on, I'll have an AGR probably up about, it's more of like a treatise on honest government or something. I forget what I've written here, but it is kind of... It'll be a little interesting. And then one last point I'm going to bring is just a piece of advice for somebody that may have been relocated to a new area, kind of like maybe at the last minute, and it kind of sucks for them. Maybe they made a move to a new job in a new area that doesn't have the advantages because they're not familiar with the area. They're not familiar with the advantages of the area, and every area is going to have its advantages and disadvantages. So there's 3 places where you can always find the foundation. Well, I wouldn't say always, but 3 places where, if you're going to start finding the foundations for what you need to know. So my advice is, first, visualize what you want, what you need. And then where you can find what you want and what you need is in a museum. Because if you go to the museum is typically going to know people, and I'm talking like, a museum of natural history, all right? They're going to be community oriented. They're going to typically know, because they're going to need philanthropists typically to fund the museum, number 1. Number 2, they need experts and historians to be able to cover that information. Number 3, they're going to know the area around the museum, because that's where the museum is drawing on its resources. Or essentially its draw is to know the area, to know the history of the area. And the people there will be able to explain it to you. And then perhaps knowing what your objective or your goal is, then you can gather the information perhaps to organize the next step. The second place is the library. Okay, librarians are remarkably well read. I know that might surprise you, but it is the truth. Librarians are typically very well read, and the people that you meet in libraries also will be very well read. So they will tend toward probably either being educated or being specialists, and having probably just a slightly higher than average knowledge about any given situation, because they like to read. All right. And then the third place is going to be something that you may or may not agree with, but I can tell you it works, is the bar. Because what you hear over here in a bar, or when you get somebody drunk enough, you're going to find out whatever you need to know. And they're going to tell you everything if you treat them right. Good way to build alliances, and 3 different types of people. So you don't always just want one type of person. I believe that there's somebody out there for everything. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't believe that there's anything that is for them, or they expect to have somebody else to tell them what to do, which still is fine. I digress. A discussion for another day. It's been Hank. Catch you guys on the flip side.